Hey everybody, today is a beautiful day outside as you can see behind me because it is extremely bright. So hopefully you can still see me and hear me okay. But today we're going to talk about types of government, okay? You already kind of watched a little video introing government, kind of getting you think about government. And today we're going to break down the four major types of government that we'll learn about this year. A couple of them you should have learned about last year in 5th grade, but we're going to continue on this year and add a new one as well. So we're going to talk about dictatorship, monarchy, theocracy, and democracy today. Let's start off real quick with what is government. Government, it's a very important word. You're going to hear that word throughout your life. You're going to take a government class in high school, and government is kind of intertwined with social studies throughout every single grade level. So what is it? Well, government is a group person or a group of people who rule or lead over another group of people, right? So if there's leaders or rulers or there's laws, all of that is going to be kind of related to government, which kind of leads into the second bullet point here, is that government is in charge of creating, enforcing, and protecting laws and rules within the land, right? So they're in charge of the laws of the land, they're in charge of what you can do as a citizen, and they're kind of the group of people or person that leads your entire country or city or whatever area of land that you're ruling over. So when we're looking at government, there's usually some type of relationship between how much power the government has and how much power the citizens have. So I'm going to kind of try to move myself out of the way here so that you can see everything okay, right? So the first kind of major point here is, how is power attained and held? So do people vote for the leader? Do they have a traditional way of selecting their leader? Are the leaders picked through religion? Are they forced? Are they forcing their way in? Right? There's a lot of different situations that power can be obtained, and it's going to be kind of depend on which type of government we're talking about. So then the other part is looking at the difference between those people that are governing, the rulers, versus the people that are being governed, which are the citizens. Do the leaders have limited power or unlimited power, which we're going to break down in just a second. So if you look over here on the right, we see that there's a little bit of a balance beam here, right? So if the government has more power, that means the citizens typically have less rights and less power. If the government has less power, that usually means the citizens have more power. So you're going to kind of see that shift in power based on the different types of government that we discuss here. So how much power do leaders have? We kind of break these down into unlimited versus limited power, and that kind of determines how much power you're going to have as a leader. So if you have unlimited power, that means you have zero limits to your power. You have full and complete power to do whatever you want, when you want. You have absolutely no limits, right? So then there's limited power. So if you have limited power, that means you do not have an endless supply of power. You have power, but you have limits to what you can do. Or maybe there's other people in the government that can kind of also have a say in what goes on, and they can limit what you do in your country or state or city or whatever type of land that you were ruling over, right? So laws, written documents, other people can kind of limit your power, right? So let's break into our first type of government, which is a dictatorship. Dictatorship you probably have heard of before, right? Then we're going to get into monarchy. Then we're going to get into theocracy, which is that new government that you probably haven't heard of yet. And then we're going to finish off today with democracy, which should be most familiar to you because that is what we are in the United States. So starting with dictatorship. I'm going to again move myself out of the way. As you can see this image here, you see one person with a weapon and you have a lot of people obeying, right? So typically in a dictatorship, it is one person or a small group of people who have unlimited power over all the people, and they're typically ruling through force or through fear, right? So they have full power and they kind of control everything. Then you have a little bit of a breakdown of dictatorships where we got to figure out who rules, right? Who rules? It's probably one person, and it's probably a small group of leaders that maybe are part of the same family, or maybe just someone that overthrows the previous person. So power is typically gained through force or fear tactics, right? So they might use their military or their police force to try to put you into so much fear that you will never go against them, and so that they can keep power as long as they want to keep power. And typically the only way that power changes if someone else forces their way through and gains power themselves, right? And then citizens in dictatorship countries don't really have many rights and freedoms. They typically can't vote. They can't hold political office, which basically means they cannot be in the government making any of the decisions, which is kind of different than what we have in the United States, right? And if you look at the little box here, it says the ruler has unlimited power. They use force. Citizens don't really have any voice in their government, and their rights are not protected, which is kind of recapping what I just talked to you about with dictatorships, right? So dictators control pretty much all aspects of life. Here's just a few things that they control. They control the military, they control police, they control the media, right? They can actually censor what you watch on TV or what you view on the internet. They can block websites, right? They control all of the media. They control education, who can learn, what they can learn. They control workers, they control churches, they control businesses. They pretty much control anything in the country that would have to have a decision being made, right? They want to have full control, unlimited control over everything. Okay. So let's switch into our next type of government, which is monarchy. And I have a crown here because monarchies typically are using that term king or queen or a royal family, right? So a monarchy is when there's a royal family slash monarch, typically called king or queen, that is ruling over a country, and power is going to be passed through traditional ways. Okay. You might also hear other monarch words like emperor, empress, or pharaoh, sultan in some countries, which is also going to basically be a form of royal family. Okay. So with monarchies, we know the monarch rules, which is typically a king or queen. They gain the power through their family line, and the power is inherited. So that basically means if I was the king of a country and I die, or I give up my ruling over my country, then my power is going to be passed down through my family. It's usually going to be the oldest child. All right. So sometimes it is the oldest male child. It used to be in ancient times. Sometimes it's just the oldest child in general. But power is typically passed through that royal family. Okay. So in today's world, you might have heard of the United Kingdom or England as being a pretty popular monarchy. There's Saudi Arabia, which is an absolute monarchy where the king or queen has all power. And in the past, most of our ancient civilizations that we will learn about this year also would be examples of monarchies with full power. Okay. So like I said, there's two types of monarchies though. This is kind of a pretty big difference too. So down here in the bottom left, you see absolute monarchy, and it looks almost like that image I used for dictatorship, right? Well, that's pretty much because it is, right? So monarchies that are absolute mean that the monarch has full, unlimited power over everything. They control everything, just like a dictator does. The only difference is they are called king and queen, and the power is being still passed through the family. So it's basically a dictator that goes by king or queen and passing the power down to the family. Then on the right here, we have a constitutional monarchy. And you can see Queen Elizabeth over here waving to us because she is an example of a queen that is part of a constitutional monarchy in England, right? So in constitutional monarchies, their power is limited. They are not full power, okay? The monarch is the head of the country, and they are usually very traditional. They go to a lot of ceremonies, they wave at banquets, they wave at parades, they live in a royal palace, but they're not usually making a whole lot of the actual government decisions. Typically, constitutional monarchs or constitutional monarch queens and kings are elected, and the laws are voted on, and then the power kind of passes through the family, right? So there's some type of other type of government that's limiting the power of the queen, where in absolute monarchy, there's nothing that limits their power. So they're very different, but they both have a king or queen, and they both pass power through their families. Now, let's move into theocracy, which is probably the one that you've never learned about before. Over on the right here, you see an example of a holy book, right? So that's because theocracies are governments that have religious leaders that have all the power, right? So governments that are led by religion, religious leaders, religious books, and all decisions are made through that religious text or religious lens, and it's called a theocracy. Okay. So in a theocracy, religious leaders have absolute authority typically. They pretty much have all power. Their laws and actions sometimes are influenced by the holy book or by their religion, and there's usually not any opportunity for freedom of religion. Right? In America, we have the freedom to choose any religion that we want, or you can choose to follow no religion. Well, in theocracies, you're typically forced to follow a specific religion. You don't really have that freedom. So who rules? Religious leaders and groups of religious leaders, and they rule through the lens of the religious book. Typically they are said to have divine power, which basically means that they were chosen, in their opinion, to be ruled by they were chosen to rule by the gods. So they believe that they have this religious power inside of them that allows them to rule over the country. And then citizens in these countries, sometimes they're allowed to have a little bit of say, but most of the time the leaders have close to unlimited power. So a lot of leaders and theocracies have a lot of power over the people, and they obviously, because of the religious laws and religious texts, a lot of times those laws and leaders limit what citizens can actually do and what they're allowed to do in society. Okay. And then last but not least, we have democracy today. Democracy is probably the one that's most familiar to you because that is the government type that we use in the United States. Okay. So democracy basically means that it's a government where the people have the power. Right? People are the ones that rule. And the reason we say that people rule is because we have ways to elect leaders and we have direct say pretty much in who becomes the leaders of the country, right? Or we're voting for people to make the decisions for us. So, in a democracy, the people are the source of power. They can exercise power that the people have been given. The powers of the government are limited, so the leaders can't do whatever they want, whenever they want. And the rights of citizens are usually guaranteed by some type of written document, right? Like a constitution in our case. So, who rules? The people directly are ruling, or representatives are chosen by the people. So, people have some say in whoever rules, right? They gain power through voting, right? So we are used to those elections. We just had an election this year for president. So people around the country or citizens in the country, as long as you're of a certain age, can vote for who they want to represent them in the government. And last, citizens in the country of democracies typically have more liberties and freedoms and responsibilities than other countries that maybe have a different type of government. And citizens can typically run for political office. So if I woke up one day and decided that I wanted to become president, I could take the steps to try to become president. That doesn't mean I'll be elected. That doesn't mean I'll be voted as president. However, I technically could go through the steps as I get older to run for president because I have that right as a citizen of a democracy. Okay. So the word democracy actually itself means the people rule, right? So demos means the people, kratos means the rule. So they came up with that word democracy, which basically means the people are ruling. All right. So just kind of a little fun fact there. There are also two types of democracies, just like there were in monarchies, right? So I will tell you right now, the left-hand side, the direct democracy is not very common. Direct democracy means that every single person votes on every single issue, and you can't really do that in the size of a country like America because we have too many people. Okay, so small population of people could technically have a direct democracy where you are all voting for every single issue, but we are just too big to do that. So instead, we have a representative democracy, which is what most democracies are around the world today. So that means we vote for representatives to be the person that makes decisions on our behalf or leads the country on our behalf, or state or city or whatever government we're talking about, right? So I vote for representatives who I think would be best fit to lead over whatever place I'm living in, right? So representative democracies are a little more common and they're able to work with larger groups of people. Okay. So in the United States, I just want to break that down a little bit. Our democracy, obviously, we have a representative democracy and we run our entire government based off of the Constitution, which was written a long time ago, actually, in the 1700s. So this document was written, it basically ironed out where power is going to be distributed and who's going to have power and how they get power. And it was all in written forms. And still to this day, we choose to use this document to decide how the government is going to be picked, right? So we can still vote for people who we think would be best fit to represent us. And then once we vote for those people, they kind of separate the government into three branches, which you probably have heard of before, right? The legislative, the executive, and the judicial branch. The reason that we do that is because we don't want one branch to become too powerful and to take away power from the people, right? So they decide to break up government into thirds so that everybody has power and it makes it so that we can check and balance each other out so that no one becomes all powerful and takes away the citizens' rights and freedoms like they do in other types of government, right? So we know the legislative makes laws, the executive is going to be like the president who is carrying out the laws, and then we have the judicial who's going to make sure that the laws agree with that written document, the Constitution. So those three branches are kind of what make up our representative democracy. Okay, guys, so that is pretty much it for the day. This is a quick recap slide, just showing you kind of all the different examples that we talked about today. If you look over here on the left, you're going to see our types of government, and you're going to see some categories up top that could just be a nice little refresher for you to glance over here at the end. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'm excited to get into government. This is kind of an interesting topic. And if you have any specific questions about government, feel free to let me know, and I can address those for you. All right, guys, have a great day. I'm looking forward to working with you and government as we keep going here.